Today in the presentation, I'm going to start off, believe it or not, I'm going to start off with a distilled conclusion and to talk about, what we should do to make this a successful project. Then I'll talk about a typical situation, what went wrong in the typical situation, the fundamentals, 2 strategic challenges that you're going to have in the project, components of automation, components of the automation retrofit project, and I'm going to introduce the term retrofit because that's really what we're doing to the manual regression suite. Describe an approach and a plan, and then have some concluding remarks. The distilled conclusion. The secret to success is really pretty easy, and simplicity is the essence of genius. So if you're going to automate your manual regression suite, don't get complicated. It's really not a difficult or a complicated problem. Keep it as simple as possible, and things are going to go a lot smoother for you. You need to plan and then execute the plan. It sounds obvious, but as we'll see later on in the presentation, things happen to us that cause us to kind of not plan and just rush to execution. So plan to execute, then execute the plan. Stay with the fundamentals. Kind of goes with simplicity as the essence of genius. Don't get too cosmic. Don't get too complicated, and things will go a lot smoother. And then always communicate, communicate, communicate. Let people know where you're going, what you're doing, what you've done, and report results. A typical situation, and I'm sure everybody in the webinar here today has been through this. You've got hundreds, thousands, and even tens of thousands of existing manual test cases. Manual test execution is very expensive, so you instantiate a project to automate these test cases. And I think we've all been through that, and we've had some successes and probably not so much successes. So what you did when you had this is you invited vendors to provide solutions and bid on the automating the test cases. You provided sample test cases to all the vendors that participated in the bid. And so you've gone out to your vendor network. You probably have several. There might have been 1 or more vendors. There could have been a dozen or more vendors. Or you could have gone to your automation teams internally here. So as I talk about external vendors, this could also apply to an internal automation team. Typical situation, when you got the bids back, many and possibly all of the vendors stated most, if not all of the test cases, would have to be rewritten to facilitate automation. The resulting cost of the proposals exceeded your budget and your expectations. So you've got this regression suite of manual test cases that is just cumbersome, takes a long time, costs a lot of money, it's a lot of manual execution, and so you open it up to bid, and all the bidders come back and say, we have to rewrite all of these test cases because we can't automate them. Here's the dollar value for doing that. You look at it and go, I don't know how we're going to get there from here. I wasn't expecting this. So all the vendors, you've discussed with a bunch of them. You've triaged them down after much churn and many iterations on scope and deliverables. You might have selected a vendor who then performed the automation work, or maybe a team internally did the automation work. And when the automation work was over, the results did not meet your expectations. In other words, you spent all this time and money to automate your inefficient manual regression test suite, and all you got was an inefficient automated test suite, and it just didn't meet your expectation. What went wrong? Right? If the work is not started yet, what do I need to know to get the best results? Start with what went wrong. Let's start with a sample test case because you've got hundreds of these, thousands of these, tens of thousands of these, and I can say tens of thousands is probably could be a low number. I've recently been out in the field and came across an organization that I'd done some work for this year. They had hundreds of thousands of test cases, manual test cases. And so let's take a look at those test cases, a sample that you provided to the vendors, and see what that test case looks like. So this is pretty reflective of a real test case, right? Find an account with enough permissions to conduct the transaction. log in and navigate to the transaction screen, conduct the transaction, verify the transaction was successful, review reports to see that the overall account total reflects the transaction, and log out. Let's take a 30,000-foot level review of that test case. It requires application SME knowledge to execute. Some count to use for the test case, which is bullet number 1, requires SME knowledge to find and use an account. There's no details on how to conduct a transaction or what defines the transaction as being successful. There's no details on the data needed to conduct the transaction. So what went wrong? A large number of the test cases, if not most or all of the test cases, require SME knowledge. This is probably why you were told all the test cases had to be rewritten, so that you put your bid out to, or even your internal test teams took a look at all the test cases and said, nothing about this test case. It's got no detailed information for me. I have to rewrite the whole thing. And they do all 10,000, all 100,000 test cases that are out there. What went wrong? Engineers are not application experts. They are experts in automation. And so you've got these test cases that require SME knowledge, handing it off to automation people who are specialists in automation, and they read the test case and go, I have no application knowledge. I have no idea how to do this. I've got to rewrite it so that I can automate the test case. Planning may or may not have been appropriate to the task. Now, this bullet refers to the previous slide or a few slides ago where we talked about there was some churn. You lent it out to a bidder. The bidder won the bid. They did some work. It came back, and it didn't meet your expectation. Planning may or may not have been appropriate to that task, and we'll talk about why planning may or may not have been appropriate to the task. And then finally, this is a problem that I'm sure that we've all run into, and if you haven't run into it yet, you're going to. Why aren't you coding yet in your project? You're going to hear that a lot. So I want to step back a little bit, and I want to talk about the fundamentals. Right? So when I said simplicity is the essence of genius, the fundamentals is going to help you keep it simple. And as all the project managers know, and this is the ITMPI, and there's a lot of PMI credits for here, project managers are very familiar with this, as are the automation teams. The iron triangle rules your project. Resources and scope features all must be in balance. Project, have respect for the iron triangle and adjust accordingly. Or if you haven't done your project yet, does your project respect the iron triangle, and will it adjust accordingly? Big theory, but how does it us on a daily basis, right? We're the people that got to go out and automate these, I'll pick a number, 55,000 manual test cases. So let's distill that in. This is what we face every day in our project, and it's very pertinent to automating a manual regression test suite. You can have it fast, you can have it cheap, you can have it right. Pick two. So resources and scope features turns into fast, cheap, and right. And even though this is kind of humorous and it may be a little bit on the cynical side, I actually learned this iron triangle before I got into the software.